Welcome to Keep You 100 Radio. I'm your host, Lissy Pointer, type 1 diabetic, certified health coach, personal trainer, and founder of Needles and Spoons Health and Wellness. Inside this podcast, you'll find the real and raw conversations around diabetes management, including the lessons that we don't learn in our endo's office, my best tips and trainings, and conversations from the experts that I trust inside the community so that you can create more predictability in your diabetes management and feel empowered while doing so. Let's dive in. I love using Skin because honestly it's the only patch company that I found that actually keeps my devices on while I'm doing things that I love, like weightlifting, running with my dogs, being really active and doing the things that I didn't think I could do before with diabetes. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Keep You 100 Radio. As always, I'm so excited to be here. So I'm really excited for this episode because we're going to talk about a topic that we don't really get a lot of training on inside of our endocrinologist office. At least it was one of the most frustrating processes to troubleshoot when I was first diagnosed. And keep in mind, I was diagnosed when I was 19. So it was just a lot of figuring out my body and understanding things that I thought I already had figured out from living life as a normal, quote unquote, normal teenager. So the topic that we're going to talk about today is all on exercise, working out, movement, whatever you choose to do. And we're really going to dive deep and really use this episode to have your exercise and blood sugar questions answered, because I know that this can be one of the most complex, one of the most frustrating and longest troubleshooting processes of our diabetes journey. So, this journey was particularly frustrating for me because I grew up as a gymnast for 10 years. So I'm talking 9 hours a week of practices, competitions every single week, and really like pushing my body to do things that it's not supposed to do. Flipping backwards on beams, sprinting towards the vault. If you've ever seen the movie Stick It, there's a monologue in there and it literally describes gymnastics perfectly. Maybe I'll insert a clip here.
Gymnastics tells you no, all day long. It mocks you over and over again, telling you you're an idiot, that you're crazy.
But really, like, this was my entire identity. So I did gymnastics for 10 years, from when I was 8 years old until I was 18. By the time I was 18, my body was way too burnt out. I just could not push it to do it anymore. But that again was my entire identity. So again, I was at practice almost every single day of the week. My whole weekend was taken up by these competitions. And in fact, my middle school best friend used to call me Man Arms as a cute little nickname that she came up with for me. And that was obviously devastating as a 12-year-old trying to navigate a social life with your passion. So that was fun. And my first AIM, I don't know if you guys remember AIM, one of the first social media apps on your computer. But my very first screen name was Gymnastics Little Girl. Yeah. So I guess that's how you know kind of how in depth I was into the gymnastics game. Clearly not an Olympian. It's kind of why I'm where I am now, but to give you some insight there. So fast forward, a year from when I stopped doing gymnastics and I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes as a freshman in college. This really, really broke a lot of the identity that I had built over the past 18 years. I thought that so when I was diagnosed, I had thought that I would never have that feeling of being strong again. And that feeling of being strong was something I never, ever had to question. But now here I am a year later, rebuilding my life because gymnastics was no longer a part of it. But not only that, but having to question, will I ever be strong again? That was absolutely devastating. And if you were an athlete or are an athlete, I imagine that you can kind of identify or kind of connect with that. So it felt like a lot of my identity was being stripped away. And all of this was being met with kind of that quote unquote proof. So like we all know, when we're initially diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, we kind of lose a lot of weight. So like I've always been a petite person, and hence being a gymnast for 10 years. So when I lost 15 pounds, like I looked like a skeleton. Like there was not a lot to lose. And with that came a lot of like fatigue. So like my body was not able to do things that it used to do. So even walking up and down my up to my dorm. So I was on the second floor of my dorm room, or my dorm floor, and I could barely make that walk up the stairs. So all of these things kind of gradually happening that like first I couldn't identify as type 1 diabetes or my body fighting against itself, but like being stripped away of gymnastics, going to college, having to re-navigate this new identity, and then being met with feeling weaker and losing weight and not feeling strong, and then being diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, like my whole relationship with exercise and my body was just completely wrecked, for lack of better words. And then there was this added dose of fear for my endocrinologist once I was diagnosed. So not only did I have this whole transition happening in my young adulthood, but then this one thing that I thought could kind of comfort me, which was exercise and feeling strong, it was now associated, like I now associated it with fear because of a lot of what my endocrinologist had told me. So the very first thing that I was taught about exercise and diabetes was that it was dangerous, or that I should be scared of it, or very, very cautious. And when you're taught these things, those words are constantly living in your inner dialogue, and those then turn into these belief systems that you have, and they carry into your life for years and years and years. So I think that's one thing in our healthcare system, or just in general, like when doctors are talking to you, or your parents or your friends, we do have to be very careful with our language, because these things stick and they create those belief systems that again influence our management. They influence how we approach different parts of our life with diabetes. And that goes for really any area of life, but particularly diabetes, especially when you're messing with a, injecting a hormone that, influences your life. So basically what I was taught was that like I had to basically prepare for the low situation. I had to always prepare for the low blood sugar. I had to have juice on me at all times. I had to constantly watch my meter. And that in itself, all those comments and like languages, it wasn't a very empowering approach. I did not feel empowered by exercise. I didn't feel motivated to go and do it after I was diagnosed. In fact, like I felt more scared to do it. I felt more discouraged of moving my body and exercising. And overall, it really did not feel like something I could have back in my life. Or if I did, it had to be in very small amounts. It's specifically not doing like gymnastics like I did. So the first few years of my diagnosis, I either completely avoided exercise in general because of that fear, or because of that, like, I don't want to go through this process of figuring it out. Or two, when I eventually did integrate it, I resented it a lot because a very two very opposite things happened. So number one, I would either try to go for runs because that was the only real thing left to do. I couldn't do gymnastics. I didn't know how to lift weights yet. Like things like Zumba classes and everything seemed not in my line of vision yet, because I was kind of like, I didn't want to bring that social component into it. But so I would go for runs. So I would go for runs around campus, and I would just end up low, and I would be shaky and scared. And not only that, but like it was annoying to run with like a drawstring on your back or like a fanny pack. I thought that the fanny pack idea would be a good idea, but it just ended up like just like thumping along. Like it was actually really annoying. So there's all these added components that just like made it not worth it to me. Or on the other end, I came home for the summer and I started doing CrossFit at a gym nearby. And the very opposite thing happened. I would just end up in the 300s after every single class. So here I am thinking that on both levels, I'm trying to do something intentional for my body. I'm growing up with this stigma that diabetes is caused by lack of exercise and nutrition and all these lifestyle factors. So naturally, your first thing is to think, okay, well, I need to move my body. But when I move my body, I'm just either getting one outcome or the other. And it's really, really frustrating when you're just trying to do something to support your health in your body. So no matter what I did, it just felt like I ended up frustrated. I ended up really annoyed, and I ended up with zero answers because when I would bring it to my endocrinologist, I was met with those really oversimplified answers. So I was told either, just make sure that you're bringing juice or glucose tabs, or I was taught, well, you have to, identify your trends and go from there, or just check your blood sugar before your workout, during your workout, and after your workout, and make any adjustments. And it just was very oversimplified, and it felt like that there was no real science to it. So it was really frustrating because these one group of people that I was trying to lean on for this diagnosis and to help walk me through it were ending up being less than helpful. So in 2020, this is 6 years after my diagnosis, I was finally so fed up that I decided to get my personal training certification because I wanted to understand that. I wanted to understand the science behind what was going on. So I figured the best way to do this was to learn from getting my personal training certification. And now I'm actually in the process of going through the Diabetes Motion Academy, to get my level two certification for diabetes specifically in exercise. And what I learned there was exactly what I expected, was that there's so much more to exercising with diabetes than just have a snack before and check your blood sugars before, during, and after. So what I'm going to do on this episode is I want to take you through the top 3 things that I learned in my certification that can help break down the barriers of exercise for you as well. Because with knowledge is power, with knowledge is more